My name is Jacob Dever-Akusen. I'm one of the owners of New Frameworks Natural Design Build. We are a full-service design build company up here in central northern Vermont. And we specialize in low-impact, high-performance, primarily residential and light commercial construction. We're going to take a look at one of the projects we have going on right now on Chase Road here in Middlesex. Some of the basics around the structure: it's a insulated slab on grade, about R25, 28 below the slab, R30 on the slab edge. Double stud wall construction with insulated fiberboard sheathing. That's dense pack with cellulose insulation is the primary insulation. It gets us to about R42 wall assembly, airtight membrane, Intello membrane towards the interior. We're also tightening our sheathing, a wind-tight layer from taped sheathing that's integrated up into the sheathing in the roof as well, and sealed down to the flashing over the slab edge. We have a double stud wall for our wall assembly. 2x4 stud wall on the exterior, a 4-inch cavity space, and a 2x4 stud wall on the interior. The wood, we get all of our wood from a local sawyer or a couple of local mills in Vermont, so it's all rough cut wood. We've developed really good techniques for working with rough and green wood. So that's why you'll see these studs all look a little hairy, and they're actually a full 4 inches, which is also really nice in terms of leveraging a little bit of extra cavity space for our insulation without any real increase in labor or cost. The exterior stud walls went up first, and then they were sheathed. There's a 2x4 that's set, 4 inches wide, 2 inches tall. It gives us that structural connection from the interior wall through to the exterior wall, and also gives us a really easy spacing for that cavity. So it was very simple installing the interior structural framing, and it gave us a solid surface against which we could tape joint our Intello. We didn't have the benefit of being able to do the interior walls first and then wrap it with Intello and then put up the exterior wall because we were pushing the season. So after we got those 2x4s on the flat installed 4 foot on center, we then hung up our Intello, tacked them to those 2x4s, lapped the joint, and taped it. After all the Intello was up around the interior of the building, we then built in our interior walls. And in places, you can see here where the interior walls are crossing over that 2x4, again, we used long structural screws to fasten that interior frame to that cleat. And we use strips of NAIDEC, again, little pads of NAIDEC. You can kind of see them poking out of the edges in some places where we knew that that screw would be sealed through the penetration of the air barrier. Initially, we were planning on putting the Intello inboard of the framing and then running strapping. But the interior wall finish of this assembly is going to be horizontal siding, which meant we would have had to double strap. And at that point, between detailing around the windows and coming in extra inches into the building, we felt that it would have been the path of least resistance to just use that inner stud wall as our service cavity. The roof is a little bit unique in this project. There is a balance of different aesthetic considerations that we're trying to all hold together while still maintaining our performance goals. And we need to make sure that we could achieve really solid air barrier at this most important plane of the building, as well as making sure we had enough cavity space for our cellulose installation. We first put up these timbered rafters, pairs of timbered rafters, and then put the tongue and groove, V-groove decking. On top of that, we were able to really easily run our Intello interior air barrier that it keeps all of the joints of the tongue and groove to the inside of the envelope. So we didn't have to worry at all about the paneling sort of interrupting our air barrier. There's a sort of a line of blue tape that is the connection point for the wall Intello and the roof Intello. We have aluminum flashing that we used that was mortared into the chimney and then sealed to the Intello for a fire-safe air continuation of our air barrier. And then on top of the trusses, we used Mento, and we specified Mento because we were creating a 2-inch vent cavity up above the Mento, on top of which we were then strapping and putting our cedar shingle. We wanted to make sure that there was decent drying capacity for any condensation that happened to form inside that assembly. We feel really confident with the interior air barrier, and that really is the first line of defense in avoiding condensation issues up in the attic. But nothing is perfect, and we know that there is something of a risk there, and it's a hard area to come back and deal with later. So we were really glad to have a product like Mento that allows for outward drying in the roof assembly, knowing that we'd have a little bit of cavity space below the shingles into which any moisture could theoretically dry to the outside if need be. Because it's an airtight house, we are using Lunos HRV to handle all of our balanced ventilation for the building. And it's a really open floor plan. There's not a lot of interior walls, and the whole interior cavity of the space is essentially, there's a lot of mixing. And so we're going with the Lunos for 2 reasons. One, because there's very little space to hide ductwork. And also because we want to try out this product. It seems like it's a really great option for the relatively smaller residential constructions, especially buildings where we know there's going to be a lot of easy mixing within the envelope. So we're using 2 sets of Lunos, essentially in the 4 corners of the building. You can see one up there. The stub is in place right now. The housing is in place that we installed prior to dense packing. We used the #1 tape to seal that to the Intello to make sure we had an airtight connection there. And we used the INVIS on the exterior to seal the housing to our sheathing. And we have the opposite corner of the building and then the 2 opposing corners downstairs. There's also going to be a ceiling fan because there is a sort of a cathedral section of the building that'll help with mixing if there's too much stratification, and the clients will be able to direct that as they need to on a comfort basis. Our focus is really making really very tight, very well insulated buildings that have well-tuned and sophisticated mechanical systems that are simple and keep a really high quality environment inside the building, and doing this all while using materials that are low embodied energy, low toxicity, locally and regionally sourced, and trying to cut our dependence and reliance upon petroleum feedstock, both for our building materials and for our fuel sources for our structures. And doing all of this while maintaining a very high level of aesthetic design and craftspersonship in our work.